This is Sal Khan of the Khan Academy, and I got these questions from the Brazilian magazine Superinteressante, and I don't speak Portuguese that well, but I assume it means super interesting, so I hope I can meet their standards and be at least somewhat interesting. And so they sent me these questions, and I'm just going to give my best attempt to answer it. So question number one, and actually let me use my pen tool, Sal style or Khan Academy style, to mark what question I'm on right now. So let's start with question number one. Do you see Khan Academy as a modern complement to traditional education or a resource that can be adopted without any other tool? Would that be the death of textbooks? So first, let's take the first part because the second part's a little controversial. Do you see Khan Academy as a modern complement to traditional education? Yes, I do. I think the ideal use case for the Khan Academy is someone has an amazing teacher and ideally amazing peers as well, and they can go to a physical environment and they can work with their amazing teacher and amazing peers. And what happens from our material is that they can watch it at their own pace, do the exercises at their own pace, and they would get data on themselves, and their awesome teacher and peers will get data. And then they can use that data to organize classroom time in a more interactive way so that everyone can really focus on addressing everyone's problems. And at least in our minds, it really liberates the teacher to form lasting bonds and really mentor and work with and solve the problems that the students are having with that material, and it allows the students to teach each other. The second part of it, would that be the death of textbooks? This is an interesting question. I guess it depends what you view textbooks as being for. Right now, I think in most classes, textbooks play two roles. One role is to introduce you to the material with the idea that, in a lot of classes I've been in, the professor would say, hey, why don't you go home, do some of the reading, and then that will be covered in lecture. For that use case, I think on-demand video, whether it's Khan Academy or other on-demand video, is better than a lot of the text that is may or may not that can or cannot be read by a lot of students. It's much easier to get it through on-demand video than trying to parse through that text, especially when you're unfamiliar with the concept. The other thing that a textbook is for is practice. That's where a textbook is really different than a traditional book, is that it has these practice problems in it. And what Khan Academy has is practice problems as well, but we're collecting data on them. The teacher, the student knows how they did, how long it took them, what they're having a weakness in, or what they're strong in, and the student gets instant feedback. They know what they're understanding. They know what they're not understanding, and they also get steps that we at least hope explain to the student where they might have messed up. Maybe they made a careless mistake, or maybe got the conceptual error that they might have had trouble. And of course, it's all tied to the videos. And most textbooks right now don't give that level of data to the student or to the teacher or the parents or anyone else. And they don't even give that much feedback. They might have the answers to half the questions in the back of the book. Some have a little bit more than that, but not much more. So in those roles, we think that on-demand video with self-paced software with feedback and data can do a lot of those. And it's even better when it's free and it doesn't weigh 10 pounds. But with that said, I don't think textbooks are going to completely disappear. I think they're going to be really useful as a reference. I have a bunch of textbooks that I'm staring at right now on my shelf, and I treasure them. And I think they'll be a really useful reference. But it's not clear whether you're going to have generations and generations of students having to buy the new version of the textbook every few years, especially for subjects that are not changing on a regular basis. It's also clear whether physical textbooks are probably not going to be in the mainstream. There's already a lot of people doing e-textbooks, but I assume that this question is addressing e and physical textbooks. Question number two. If children study at home and only go to school to do exercises, teachers' presence may become less important. Would they have some kind of a consultant role instead of being someone who explains the concepts? So I'll address the first part. If children study at home and only go to school to do exercises, teachers' presence may become less important. And so this is something that I'll disagree strongly with. I think, imagine if we were doing the other way. Imagine if the world was a world where when kids went to class, they had deep interactions with their peers and, more importantly, or maybe equally importantly, with the teacher. Where they went to class, the teacher knew who they were, the teacher knew everything about the student, interacting with the student, mentoring the student. The teacher knew exactly what the tripping points were of the student, how to phrase information specifically for that student, knowing what that student's context is. And then all of a sudden, I were to go into that classroom and say, no, teacher, you have to stop doing this mentorship, this direct one-on-one instruction with students. And what I want you to do is not have these conversations with students anymore. And what I want you to do is go to the front of the room, and I want you to give these lectures that are essentially these one pace, one size fits all lecture. And I want you to really, it'll be essentially the same lecture that every teacher in the country is giving and that you've given years before. That would be making the teacher less important, because you would have taken them as a human being, as someone who understands what's going on in the student, kind of the doctor for the student's knowledge, and then you would be turning them into a broadcast mechanism. And so we're doing the exact opposite. Right now, unfortunately, a lot of teachers want to be that mentor. A lot of the teachers want to use class time for interaction and creativity. But right now, they have to move the entire class at the same pace, and they have to give that lecture. Many times with very little interaction with the students. And so what we're saying is, no, that can happen at the student's own time and at the student's own pace. And then the teacher just becomes, every minute of time with the teacher just becomes with this valuable nugget. Some of the classes that we're piloting, the teachers are spending, one of the teachers is making a point to spend 15 minutes one-on-one with every student per week, at least. And I can remember years that I went by never getting 15 minutes one-on-one with a teacher. And that happens to many, many students. So we think, if anything, it's making the teachers far more important. They're forming bonds. They have to have a better grasp of all of the information now, because you have students working at their own pace. And it's really taking them up the value chain, because they're no longer giving the same lecture year in, year out. And then the second part of the question, would they have some kind of a consultant role instead of being someone who explains the concepts? So what I would say is that they're still explaining the concepts, but they're explaining the concepts given all of the information that they now have about the student, given the fact that that student has already maybe watched our videos, has already done exercises, that the teacher can now act on the data based on those coming from those videos and those exercises. So once again, I think that the teacher has moved up the value chain. They're now more valuable for that student than they were as a pure lecturer. Question number 3. When children have the freedom to study by themselves at home, surrounded by other appeals such as internet, social media, and also the possibility just to ignore the lessons, isn't it too much confidence in their passion for learning? Don't you think some discipline is necessary to make them study instead of doing anything else? So there's a couple of ways to think about it. Right now, in a traditional classroom, you have mostly lecture going on, maybe with a little bit of other things, and then all of the problem solving, all of the homework happens at home. And I agree. Some students might not have the motivation to do it at home, and we see a lot of kids skipping out homework, or even the ones that do have the motivation might not have the help. And so in my mind, where the real learning happens is actually when you're trying to do the problem solving. And what's happening right now is when a lot of students are skipping out on the problem solving, on the doing the homework, either because of distractions or because they have no one to help them. And then they all go to a room together where they're in the same room, but they're all passively listening to a lecture. We think if you had to drop one thing from that equation, make sure the problem solving occurs. Make sure that the teacher sees students do problems. Don't put that out for homework where it may or may not happen. And if you had to, and we wouldn't advocate this, but we think if you had to pick between doing homework and lecture, which one do you skip? Frankly, the lecture is, I think, the one that's more optional. In fact, some students, and we've seen this in some of our pilots, you show them enough examples, or their peer can teach them how to do something. They don't necessarily even need to see the lecture. If they see a few examples of it, that's enough, and maybe they'll go back and watch the lecture for more depth, or for more intuition on the subject. But with that said, on top of that, we don't want to just completely let it up to the student's judgment and have the teacher guessing when they come to class the next day whether or not the students watched lectures or did some of the problems. And so that's why we're so focused on the data. That's why we're so focused on, right now, the teacher does get a real-time dashboard. And in a traditional classroom, the teacher just sees who turned in their homework or who did the homework, and who knows if they copied it from another student. They don't know how long it took the students to do the homework, whether they got it right or wrong. They don't know what time of day they did the homework. Now the teacher will know everything. Now the teacher knows what videos the student watched. Where did they even pause the videos? What videos did they have to repeat? They'll see the spread of where every student in the class is. They'll see what problems the kid actually did, how long it took them, when they did those problems. Early on when I was doing this, I saw one of my cousins was doing all of their problems at 2 in the morning. That by itself was probably more information that they were awake at 2 in the morning than the fact that they were even getting some of those problems wrong. That's something that a human being can then intervene in. And so going back to the too much confidence. No, now we're arming everyone with a lot more data. So it's de-risking the just putting it all on the student to do everything at home. Question number 4. Let me scroll down a little bit. And the possibility to learn in your own wouldn't contribute to isolate shy and misfit kids. So once again, complete opposite. And some people might be surprised to hear this, but I was actually very, very shy, especially in elementary and to some degree in middle school. And I felt very, very isolated in my classrooms. When I was in a classroom of 30 kids, even when I had a question, I was afraid to raise my hand. And I think this is true of many, many, many kids. You don't want to embarrass yourself raising. It's usually the most outgoing kids who are willing to raise their hand, usually the 2 or 3 most outgoing kids. And so I was never willing to do that. And so if I didn't understand something, I would just put it on myself to go home and try to struggle with it somehow. I had my sister who often helped me with things, but I felt very isolated. And also because I was shy, there would be 30 kids in the room, but I really only knew maybe 5 of them well, maybe because they sat near me. So I would sit in classes, and this is even true in college. I used to sit in classes in college where there was 100 people in the room, and I only knew 2 of them. And I would sit in that room for the whole semester, and I would never get to meet any of them the way that a traditional model works. And frankly, the professor never knew who I was, and that even happened in some of my elementary and middle school and high school, where I don't really think the teacher knew who I was. And so what we're saying is the exact opposite. What we're saying is now you're using the class time for the students to actually interact with each other. And so if you look at these pilots that we're running in Los Altos, you have all of the students interacting with all of the students. You don't have these little cliques where certain kids only hang out with other kids and ignore the rest. You have them all helping each other. And it actually gives an outlet for the shy kids, maybe the shy kids who perform a little bit better academically, to actually gain confidence by teaching their peers. Their peers start to respect them more, not just this shy kid who happens to do good at school, but like, wow, that kid helped me. And so we're seeing way more interaction, way more. There's no kid who's just hiding during the lecture and just pretending to understand the information. Everyone is interacting. The teachers are interacting with the students are interacting with each other. So we think it's the exact opposite. We think we're taking the isolation that the shy kids are feeling right now, and we're having them actually interact with each other in a human experience in the classroom. Question number 5. Do you believe that some old-fashioned thinkers just don't accept an education system that is supposed to be cool? Not 100% sure how to answer that question. I guess the assumption here is that what we're proposing is cool. I think it is. I think any time there's change, there'll always be resistance, and I think that's a healthy thing. People should actively question things, and no one should adopt something just because it's supposed to be cool or just because it sounds cool. You shouldn't just accept it because it sounds cool, and you also shouldn't just reject it because it sounds cool. The reality is that you really should see whether it's working, and you should see whether it's working on multiple levels subjectively. How are the teachers and the students liking it? How is the energy level? And you should also look at it objectively. How is their performance changing? There definitely are knee-jerk reactions against new things, and there are knee-jerk reactions for new things, and neither of those are the best ways to approach. You really should just have an open mind to anything and see if it really works. Question number 6. How has the acceptance to Khan Academy, I would assume, been in the United States? Has Bill Gates' support helped to open some conservative doors? So, we're still in the early days. Khan Academy, once again, it started as a very grassroots thing. I started it for my cousins. It was adopted not because a governor or the president told people to adopt it or a superintendent did it. It was adopted because students chose to use it. Students on their own, students who happened to bump into it on the internet found it useful. So it was a very grassroots thing. And only later, once we had significant traction, and I'd been doing this for 5 or 6 years, did it start to get on the radar of some fairly prominent people, many of those who have supported us now, including Bill Gates and Google and others. And so in terms of the acceptance of the Khan Academy in the U.S., the people who have chosen to adopt it naturally like it. They made the decision to use it, and we haven't forced it on anyone else. And I think that's a really important thing, because I don't think when anyone forces anything on anyone, they tend to not like it. But so far the acceptance has been very good, and we've had really fascinating experiences and tremendous results with the pilots that chose to adopt it. If we talk about the formal setting, and if you think about the informal setting, the students who are just using it independently, I encourage anyone to go to our YouTube page or our Facebook page and just read the commentary from students, and even ask them questions, contact them, and see how it's helped them. And I think you'll see that at least we like to think it's profoundly affecting a lot of students in the U.S. and the world, frankly. The question: has Bill Gates' support helped to open some conservative doors? I think that's a mixed question, a mixed answer. I think it's definitely given validation within certain circles. I think people in Silicon Valley really respect having that Google is behind us, Bill Gates is behind us. These are obviously groups and people who are obviously intelligent, who've obviously been successful, who obviously understand what a math and science education is for, who are almost the examples of what the people at Google understand. That there's no better application of math and science than what Google has done, or what Bill Gates has done, or what other people in Silicon Valley have done. So that's definitely validation. Whether it opens conservative doors is not clear, because I think Bill Gates has also been doing other things. He's very open, he's very active in the charter movement. He's been pushing for other things, and so there are some people who react against that, and they might be tempted to throw us in the same bag. But us personally, we try to not take an opinion on that. We want to be useful for anyone, whether they are in any organization, and so we're not taking a political stance there. But I think because Bill Gates really is one of our biggest supporters, some groups are more receptive to it, and some groups are less receptive to it. But overall, I definitely think it's been a huge positive, because I think the parents and the students view it as a huge plus when someone whom they respect thinks so highly of it, and uses it himself, and uses it for his kids. And so question number 7. Has Khan Academy ever been contacted by some Brazilian school or company interested in adopting its methods? I can't say no totally. We've had a lot of contact with people from Brazil, and we are actively translating the video content to Portuguese. So we've had contact with Brazil. We're not doing any formal pilots in Brazil. I wouldn't be surprised if some students or teachers are using it independently. In fact, I'm sure some students are, and teachers can use what we're doing in Los Altos on their own, but we don't have any formal pilots in Brazil right now. Question number 8. Besides the positive testimonies from Los Altos' teachers, do you have some numbers that could measure how Khan Academy has helped students to develop? Some numbers that can help us compare traditional education to your system's performance. So the simple answer is yes, we do have numbers, and this is why Los Altos has decided to go district-wide with this in the 5th and 6th grade. Actually, let me pause the video and let me get you some of those numbers. Hold on one second. So you asked for data, so here's data that I got. And we have other data, but this one piece of data was probably the most compelling that really convinced Los Altos. And it's not a rigorous study, and we're going to be doing more rigorous studies this year with larger data sets and in a more controlled way. But we obviously had all of the anecdotal, higher energy in the classroom, kids were more engaged, the teachers loved it, but we wanted to see real data. So this is actually what we saw out of the 7th grade pilots. And I want to be clear, these 7th grade classes were they were considered developmental classes, kids that weren't tracked with the normal students. They were held back. They weren't performing at grade level. And this shows how they performed at their district standardized exam in 2010. And you can see that the best students here, you had 23 that were proficient, then you had 47 that were basic, 23 that were below basic, and then you had 6 that were far below basic. Don't get this light blue confused with this dark blue over here, because they're saying very different things. So this is far below. So this right over here, they're not doing well, far below basic, this 6. And so the same students, after doing Khan Academy for about 6 or 7 months, and once again, it's hard to separate how much Courtney Caldwell who's the teacher here, is just an off the charts awesome teacher, so it might be due to her as well. But what we've seen, she herself expressed that the energy level that she saw in the class is very unusual for especially a class that is at this developmental stage. These are the results from this year's standardized exam. So there's no longer any students in this group that are far below basic, and in fact there are now 6 kids that are advanced. So just to be clear, these are kids that have now leapfrogged their peers who are not placed in this class. So normally when you're tracked into a slower class, that's usually the end of your math career. You're usually just going to drift further and further behind the other students. These students, after half a year, actually got did better than many students who weren't placed into the slower class. And then you have many, many more students who are now proficient. The basic, you still have 47, but you have so many more who are proficient or advanced. And then you have no students that are far below basic. And 12% of the pilot students moved from being below basic to proficient, 12%, and 6% moved from far below basic to basic. So we have there's a general trend where people just moved forward. So this was the big one. We have other data, and we're hoping to get a lot more data this year. And then once again, not a rigorous study, so not something that we can publish in a scientific journal, but that with all of the anecdotal evidence made Los Altos feel pretty good and made us feel pretty good. And we don't consider this a done deal. We consider ourselves that we're just in the first inning, and we have to constantly improve this thing so that we can get even better results next year and then the year after that. Question number 9. Do you believe children should have the opportunity to use other new technologies in schools, such as mobile phones, iPods, and podcasts? I think it's like everything. If it's used in a proper context, and yes, if it's helpful, and if it's not helpful, maybe no. But we should have an open mind about what helpful is or what it isn't, and just try things out and adjust accordingly. Question 10. Are films the new books? Do you think that a culture focused on images has contributed to the notion that books are boring? Films, on some level they are, even before Khan Academy shows up, films have always been a form of book, but people still like to read the book and then watch the film. The books give you more depth, give you more nuance, but the films are still fun. I don't think it's a culture focused on images that had contributed to the notion that books are boring. I think there are books that are amazing and fascinating, and some of my best experiences in life are from reading some of those amazing books. But there are books that are boring. And it doesn't hurt if we can find a medium that is less boring. So I think it really depends from case to case. And I don't think it's just this generation. I think if you've taken any generation and if you'd given them something that's less boring or a better way or a more intuitive way or a more approachable way to understand something, they would have found it equally compelling.